Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Goldmaking, presented by Darkshorecapital. It's currently November 13th, 2018. WoW tokens this week have not changed on either side of the pond. Interesting stuff to look at there. Looks like overall the BFA items that we're tracking continue to trend downwards. Midnight Salmon up a little bit on the EU side of things. And then if we look at our more old school materials, pretty big downturn across the board on the US side, whereas it's a bit of more of a mixed bag on the EU markets. Not quite sure really what to make of that. It is kind of interesting how much of a difference there is between the price of Primal Fire on the two different regions. And lastly, I will address briefly the price decrease of Activision Blizzard stock. I'm sure many of you are aware of its current price performance, as it's kind of come up a little bit here and there within the World of Warcraft community anyway. But I think it's a lot less to do with the whole Diablo debacle and a little bit more to do with active users, as reported in the most recent quarterly report from ATVI. I personally haven't had a chance to listen to the remarks or read through the report yet. It is on my list of things to do, as I do keep track of their stock a little bit in more detail than just looking at a chart. So I will get back to you all with what I have to say on that one in a future episode, going a little more in depth and try and get to the bottom of exactly why that price has dropped. News for the week. We've got a few quick little items. Number one, and this is probably the biggest piece, Bilis Onyxia, the famed gold maker, has posted a link. This one's posted to Reddit. The link is going to be in the description and in the show notes, of course. And it's a big import dump of BFA, BOE, TSM groups. It's a beautiful thing. Pretty much all the permutations that you might be able to imagine of the different BOEs, from Titan Forging, item levels, tertiary stats, sockets, etc., etc. It's all in there. So if you have been yearning for a framework with which to add some more discrete operations for different scenarios you might encounter with BOEs, this is definitely a good place to start. I've started to work with a little bit. Going to be kind of rearranging some stuff a little bit and probably adding some operations to try and move the BFA BOE flipping into a bit more of an automated process than it is for me right now. But I'm sure I will be talking more about that in the future, because BOE flipping is, of course, a large source of my gold income. Next piece of news, BC Time Walking is this week. Among other things, you can get all the different neat little cosmetic stuff, mounts and such, and do the Black Temple dungeon, or I guess it's a raid, if you haven't unlocked the Warglaze of Azeroth transmog for your demon hunters and you have those. It's a pretty good thing to do, but I digress. From a gold making perspective, there are a number of BC instances on the rotation that have a chance to drop moats. Particularly Moats of Shadow come to mind. I believe those come out of the Mana Tombs. Moats and Primal Shadow are typically not super expensive and super scarce, so it's not really the greatest opportunity, but it is something to look out for if those are materials that you do use regularly. This week is probably a good time to stock up them, because there'll be plenty of people running those and trying to dump it for a little bit of extra gold. And then lastly, I want to talk briefly about Project 60. For anyone that's unfamiliar with this, it's a activity that typically streamers will start in the World of Warcraft community, where you level a character up to 60 with some restrictions to try and make it as vanilla-like as possible, and then run through progression of the various vanilla raids. Now, they do have a bunch of restrictions on this, and if I'm not mistaken, they are allowed to use the auction house. However, if they're going to be doing that, they have to buy only from people in the guild. Now, this is where things get a little bit on the shady side, if I'll be real for a minute. What I'm suggesting to do here is probably against the rules with which these players are putting forth. So if that's really not something you're looking into, I suggest just moving on at this point. But honestly, if I'm real about it, the gold making opportunities here are pretty limited. I think it's more of just an interesting thing to look at, because what I've noticed in watching the Project 60s take place in the past, Blackwing Lair tends to be a big stumbling point for the groups, and particularly there's one boss in Blackwing Lair named Chromagus, which requires the use of on-use items, sort of like a potion, in order to cleanse a certain debuff that the boss puts on you. Now, back at level 60, your raid would be clearing Blackwing Lair week after week and have plenty of these items stockpiled because they drop a lot and you kind of just stockpile them for when you need them for that boss. And then, of course, only so many players would need I believe they're called Sands of Time. And so, but it becomes a little bit more important with these smaller groups because on the Project 60, I believe they do 6 or 7 people to a raid group because the instances are completely not scaled properly anymore. So, yeah. And they tend to be pretty scarce because, well, you're going to be clearing out trash once, and the boss is pretty tough. People put in, hours and hours and hours of attempts on it. So if you were an enterprising goblin who wanted to potentially make some war profiteering gold, you could, take a character on Moonguard, which is where they're doing it currently, run Blackwing Lair a few times, get some hourglass sand, and maybe figure out a way to sell it to these people who are going to need it in about a week or so. I don't know. Just interesting stuff to think about there. Project 60 is going on Moonguard US, so do with that information what you will. I want to take a few minutes tonight to talk about Variance and its role in gold making and even money making in the real world. So you'll often see things, very sensationalized YouTube videos, for example, talking about ridiculously high gold per hour numbers. And this topic has, of course, been beaten in the ground by many people on both sides of the fence. But I wanted to just kind of talk about it a little bit here. So Uldaman is famous as a instance to run to get really, really, really high value transmog. Things that sell for over 1 million gold. The Papal Fez, I think some miner's helmet, something like that. And that's all great. That's cool. But it's really just a get rich quick scheme, which at the end of the day is not a very sustainable business model for making lots of gold. Sure, it's fun. There's nothing wrong with that. But you know what else is fun that's not very profitable? Playing the lottery or going to the casino. Which, in essence, is kind of what you're doing here. You're doing something with a very, very low chance of success. And it's the thrill of getting that incredibly high payoff that keeps driving you to do it. And yeah, if you do get a Papal Fez to drop, that's a pretty big deal, and it'll probably be really exciting. So I'm not saying not to do this kind of stuff, but if what you're looking to do is make meaningful gold over the long term, you really have to avoid these traps because they're very easy to fall into. Some other examples, you may have heard of this place on Reddit called Wall Street Bets. I believe it's actually been in the news a little bit here and there, and it's kind of the same casino-esque aspect of approaching the stock market, making wild bets that have almost no chance of paying off. But when they do, and you get that screenshot of your stock account with a huge meteoric rise, well, then it's all worth it. But is it really? Because this stuff is all entertainment, is what it really comes down to. The variance involved in these low chance, high risk, high reward outcomes, it's there for the thrill. It's not sustainable. So just be aware of it. There's nothing wrong with it. Just don't let yourself get sucked in. Emotion is a very powerful human experience, and letting your emotions get into things like making gold, if your goal is to make gold over the long term in a very meaningful way, or in the real world to make money, you really have to check your emotions and make sure that they're not leading you into these high variance activities, because in the long run it's really not going to pay off. So I just wanted to talk about that. What do you guys think? I'd love to hear more, have more discussion about this. What are some high variance things? What are some get rich quick schemes in the World of Warcraft from the gold making perspective? Because they're all very interesting, and the more we know about them, the better prepared we can be to avoid them if we so choose. Let's get into some Q&A. How do you go about researching BOE demand? In BFA, there seems to be a lot of 350 BOEs that don't sell well, even at low prices. This is definitely a topic that keeps coming up in regards to BFA gold making because, in my opinion, it's the most worthwhile thing to do in BFA to make gold. And the short answer is you have to know what people want. which, you know, that's pretty key to just about selling just about anything. The more you know, the more you're capable of making informed decisions about what you should be doing. And that's really the thick and thin of it. If you go and, you know, read a few guides, figure out what the person who's actually going to equip the item, what are they looking for? What do they desire out of a BOE? That's going to inform your decisions and help you figure things out really quickly. Really, really easy one is the items that have one stat on them. So the ring with haste, the ring with mastery, the cloak with crit. Somebody's going to need one of those stats as their BIS stat for their character. So that's an easy one. Some of the other stuff, you know, like I always say, if you go look on the auction house of any high population server, there's 40 cloth versatility gloves. Like, nobody wants that. And as soon as you start digging a little bit into like what cloth wearers want, it becomes very obvious very quickly that they're just not worth it. So just dig around a little bit, do some research about what people are actually using, what stat priors for what classes, become very apparent very quickly. Next question. Are you seeing primal fires move in good quantity, or is it fairly low given it's mostly transmog? So it's hard to get concrete information about actual sale rates and sale quantity, sale volume for individual items. You can see the volume of items posted through sites like the Undermined Journal. However, actual sales data is more or less limited to what TSM can gather, which is not a complete picture. It's a good picture. It's better than nothing, but it's not complete. So what we have to go off of is sort of implied information. And here's my take on Primal Fire and primals in general. Because of the scarcity of primal fires, means that, you know, you can't just go out and farm a ton and put them up on the auction house and artificially drive the price down. So the fact that the price is staying steady means that there are some people out there buying them and using them. Now, it's not going to take a lot of people in a market like this to keep the price relatively steady. So that would lead me to believe that they don't sell too much, which is sort of weird, right? But when you factor in everything, you know, the scarcity of the item and the price not changing significantly over time, then that can mean that, you know, you've got items coming in and items coming out. There's balance, there's equilibrium, but because we know the amounts coming in, so roughly the amounts going out are going to be about the same. And since it's a scarce good, it's hard to farm, then, you know, it's probably going to be about the same amount of people using it. So I guess the answer to the question, you know, good quantity is a very ambiguous term, but I think what they mean is like a lot, enough that you could like make a lot of money really quickly. And the answer to that is no. So it's really based off of the scarcity of the items. All right, final question. Is there anything I should do while leveling up that would increase gold making? Definitely. And I'm going to address this in two parts. Number one, if you don't have Trade Skill Master enabled and the tooltips showing up in your items as you're leveling, stop right now and go make sure that's happening, because if some random BOE drops that you're out farming and just happens to be incredibly rare and incredibly valuable, you want to know about that. And it's going to be very quickly to know. It's going to be very easy to know if you can just see its value. So that's number one. Number two, and this is a little bit more tailored towards what my response would be if I was going to level a new character right now, is choose an expansion that will supply your needs for crafting. So I do a lot of BOE crafted transmog, which requires a lot of raw materials. And as we just discussed, primal fires, other motes and primals tend to be hard to get. So if I'm going to level a character and I need to go through either Outland or Northlands, I'm going to choose Outland because there's going to be a chance that I have to kill some elementals that are going to drop some motes, and that's going to help me out a little bit more than getting some more Frostweave, which is just incredibly cheap and easy to get. And more to that point, the elementals for Wrath of the Lich King, you can literally just buy from the vendors, so it doesn't really gain you a whole lot by running through Northlands leveling to do a little bit of extra. So that's my answer. Just try and think about, you know, what you're using and can you leverage that with your leveling in the zones that you choose to go to. That's going to do it for the evening. I want to thank you all for watching and listening. Again, my name is Andrew, here on behalf of Darkshore Capital. If you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, or anything you'd like to discuss, feel free to leave a comment in the comments section, or you could reach out to me on Twitter. Or if you feel like it, You can also send me an email, darkshorecapital@gmail.com. Till next time, happy gold making.